It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how are we feeling?
Feeling, I'm here. It's day after the holiday. It's the day, there's this long period of reflection when you play 3 games in 11 days, or when you cover 3 games in 11 days. Then you get 11 days off, and I think I slept until like 9:30 this morning, which is uncharacteristic of me. I'm just, I'm into break mode. I'm good on that.
Okay. Yeah, I
How are
think
you?
that I was just saying, along with a lot of people, I feel like had the merry kind of stripped from Christmas a little bit by the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday. Now, I've said this before. I've done a good job in the last few years. It wasn't always this way of separating the emotion from these games. I was still able to certainly enjoy the holiday with my family. I would have liked for the things to have gone a different way for the team on the football field. That's what we were here to talk about. Alan, you did do a post-game show yesterday. I was not on it, though. When you had texted me, we're just starting to get into the cookie tray for the night. So there was, understandable.
Perfectly understandable. Yes.
But I have not given my thoughts on this game and kind of how, the smaller picture stuff that took place could potentially play into bigger picture things down the line. This was the 3rd straight loss for the Steelers in this one to the Kansas City Chiefs. And while, I did predict them to win this game, but was not at all surprised by the way that things actually went down on the field. There were some things, though, that I'll say caused more concern than the result. For me, I think that's the bigger issue here. Like the result themselves, you could have told me they were going to lose these 3 games in a row, and 100% would have felt like that was a possibility when you look at the way that the schedule was stacked up. However, even understanding that this was a team that I said would be in that 10-7, 11-6 range, which is right where they are. But I think the bigger issue for me is the way that I'm seeing the defense kind of regress in the way that they are. Not only just the tackling issues over the last few weeks, the communication on the back end. It seems like they're giving up a lot of explosive plays. And then at the end of them, you have like 5-6 guys standing around with their hands up in the air, not knowing what's going on or where guys are supposed to be, or guys not in the right spots. You got defensive players calling somebody out on the defensive side of the football as well within that. It just seems like there's some regression on the back end of things as we've gone on through the season here. And I would have thought that these are things, week 1, week 2, when you have the amount of new pieces that they did would take place, but it's been the opposite. They started out so strong, we're good for the better part of the year. And then all of a sudden, when you get to this level of competition, I understand they're playing better football teams. That to me doesn't tell the entire story of what we're seeing take place, though, over these last few games.
Yeah, I think the injuries are part of it. When you try to look at the 3 games anyway, they weren't that injured, just missing really Joey Porter Jr. from their normal rotation. By the way, I talked to Joey today, was walking around in the locker room, said he feels better. I don't know what that means for week 18. I would generally still seem to think that he doesn't have a great chance of playing, but maybe a little bit more after talking to him today. But I think the injury certainly is a part of the whole story. I think the other part of the whole story that I touched on a little bit this morning is that I don't feel like the Steelers star players are playing like they're star players. Like, I don't think we've seen a typical T.J. Watt season out of T.J. Watt. We certainly have not seen a typical Minkah Fitzpatrick season out of Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think it took Patrick Queen some time to warm up into it. He's been pretty good. I thought he had a tough game in Baltimore, but I thought it was very good, except for dropping that interception against Kansas City. But, I don't think they're communicating very well. I think guys are trying to do too much, getting out of their roles. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of trust in the defense, which is a bad place to be. And I don't think that the defense is really dealing with the fact that it's players are not playing up to their capability. Like, they're still calling the defense like they are good enough to do the things that they've done in the past, but aren't. Similarly on offense, they're still trying to run the ball like they're a top running team, even though they're not. Russ is still holding on to the ball in the pocket like his line is going to protect him when he should know by now that they're not. Like, I think there's a lot of the Steelers trying to be the team they want to be instead of recognizing who they are at this point in the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is, you kind of just have to look in the mirror and realize who you are and make the necessary adjustments. And I would say that they haven't done a very good job of doing that. I certainly want to get to the offensive side of things, but as it relates to the defensive side of things, I threw in there, some of the players kind of lamenting this and saying, calling out seemingly one player or maybe a couple guys within the defense. What do you make of that? And, was there any more clarity in terms of that, like exactly what they're referring to?
I mean, it's certainly not good that players are talking about things publicly. I mean, I think it's pretty clear where the issues are on the defense. It's it's between the slot corners and the safeties. Like there's not a lot of wiggle room there for who people could be talking about. I don't think anybody's complaining about a Landon Roberts want to. I don't think anybody's complaining about Alex Highsmith want to.
Mhm.
So I think it's pretty clear. And I don't think, what I said this morning is I'm not so much worried about the losses as that I am worried about the impact of the losses. And this is the thing I'm
Yeah.
talking about, where it's like,
Mhm.
hey, like and I want to talk about this more, but like I think we all thought this was going to be a really tough and probably negative stretch for the team. It's one thing to think it, it's another thing to go through it. And when guys go through it, like stuff happens, things are said, people get frustrated with people that can spill over. And like I think the Steelers should wipe the floor with the Bengals in week 18, and I like their chances in Houston if they play like the team we've seen for most of the season. But if they are so frustrated and so at each other's throats about what happened over these last 3 weeks that they don't play that way, then this stretch could bleed into some more negativity.
What to you would be, so we've said, they kind of need to take a look in the mirror and adjust to what they have and get back to what they were doing prior to the game against Philly. What is the, easiest way to do so, or what is the path forward? Is it as simple as just saying like, because here I'll just say one thing that I've noticed. I did watch this game back. Unfortunately, I had a lot of time on my hands today, going back day after Christmas, not the busiest work day for me. One player that I can circle on defense that I feel like has had a negative impact on this defense, both in terms of communication and just I don't think he's the guy anymore that he's still trying to be, or the team maybe thinks he is Cam Sutton. Beanie Bishop played 0 defensive snaps yesterday. Is it as simple as saying like that can't happen? That cannot be the way that we divide those snaps up. Do we need to see less of Cam Sutton down the stretch here?
I think that's an option. I think there are, I think it's not one thing. It's a combination of like some strategic choices. Like I think the Steelers have to find a way to get pressure that doesn't rely on TJ Watt winning his one-on-one matchup over and over again throughout the game, because he's not getting very many one-on-ones. And the ones he's getting, he's not necessarily dominating. Jawan Taylor's a straight-up bad right tackle. And TJ drew 3 holding penalties, but that's it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't, and I know he's hurt, but like, you can't have a defense that is entirely built around that guy getting home and then that guy not get home. It doesn't work. And
Yeah.
so I think they've got to find some ways to make some changes, some pretty significant ones on defense in terms of the way. And, I think also like that Kansas City game exposed some personnel flaws. Like, how is Dante Jackson getting cooked by Justin Watson? Like that just, man,
Mm-hmm.
like, do they have a guy on this team that they can play man-to-man coverage with against Xavier Worthy? I don't think so. And I don't think Joey Porter is that guy either, even though he wasn't
Right.
playing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I think there's definitely some weaknesses that were exposed there. And I think it's kind of just showing to me in some ways the folly of having so much of their payroll tied up in a defense that still isn't great. I mean, it's a good defense. You can even call it a great defense, but it's not enough to win you games by itself. And I think yeah, it's they're in. I don't know how much can really be fixed, but they're not going to play a team like Kansas City again unless they get pretty far in the playoffs. So, I mean, I don't really think like there's a ton of concern there. As long as they don't just like lose their heads here, I think they'll be able to beat the Bengals and beat Houston, and then we'll see where they are. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like big picture problems that I think were revealed there.
Yeah, to me, like the defense, and this isn't like something that was revealed necessarily in this game, but it is like it's a lot of feast and famine with a pass rush, right? Like if it's not getting home, don't know that they've really built a secondary, and certainly not without Joey Porter Jr. to be able to handle that. Like you don't see this team get a lot of coverage sacks, got to be quick pressures, and if they don't get home right away, they don't necessarily have the guys on the back end to be able to cover for a long period of time. And I think Patrick Mahomes kind of exposed that, and obviously does against a lot of teams, but specifically that's something that Kansas City took advantage of in this game because the Steelers are the second worst team in terms of yards per catch allowed, under 2 seconds. Kansas City, the best team at getting the ball out quick. Like it was just a bad matchup for the Steelers. And certainly, like you said, I don't know that it would have been much better with Joey Porter Jr. I don't know that he's necessarily the player that would have mitigated a lot of those
probably
problems.
Wouldn't have got stacked by Justin Watson. That's all I got.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Which obviously was a big play and then ended up leading to a Justin Watson touchdown a couple plays later.
Oh, and they
well.
should have played and they should have started Corey Trice because he probably doesn't give up that touchdown.
And he actually, if you're looking for like some silver linings, I thought he played pretty well.
There's actually a couple silver linings. I thought Corey Trice was one of them. I thought he played really well. I thought he played better than Dante Jackson, which, okay. I thought Jalen Warren was outstanding, like as good as we've seen him all year against a very good defense. And I thought for the second really week in a row, there were guys getting open. Like I know we've talked a lot of crap on the wide receiver position, guys, and Pat got involved in the offense more, but there were plays to be made in the passing game. It was a combination of the line and Russ that were the reasons that they weren't. It wasn't this group of receivers that they have in a number of ways stepped up.
Let's switch and talk about the offense. I had put this out yesterday, and this was kind of like within the flow of the game, and then obviously Jalen Warren kind of ended up dominating snaps anyways. But one thing going back to even like Matt Canada's tenure was obviously like I think he was an awful offensive coordinator for this level. But the one thing that I thought that he did pretty well was in the flow of a game, understanding which running back had the hot hand and kind of letting them dictate the way that the touches would go. Do you feel like Arthur Smith has done that, or what is the reason? Is that maybe one of the shortcomings, or what is the reason that we maybe haven't seen that take place? I think the snap share we've seen over the last few weeks certainly has, but in terms of the touches, I don't know that they've really accounted for in the way that I would have expected.
I thought they finally are figuring it out these last couple of weeks.
Okay.
Where they finally have gotten a good read. It helps that Jalen is fully healthy and looks really good too. It's a little more difficult to do when Jalen was kind of dealing with some stuff and not at 100%. But I think like these last 2 weeks, they've really started to hone in on. And look, Najee got a lot of carries and garbage time in this game. That's fine. He's still going to be the guy that starts out most games, and that's fine too. But I felt like they realized very quickly that it was Jalen that was the hot hand. They went to him. He spent most of the middle of the game as the primary running back. And then Najee got some garbage time touches. That's fine too. But like, I think this is the first time we really saw them make that adjustment on the fly and really demonstratively to say like, Jalen's got it today. And like, you never know. Like there's certain different styles make fights sometimes. Like it's not as easy as just to say like Jalen's running back one. He gets all the carries going forward. Sure. Like they've got to be able to go into games and figure out what's working and make those adjustments live. And ideally have an idea of what's going to work ahead of time and not just run the same 3 plays to start the game as they do every week and have, have a thought about, this defense does this. Let's do this to start off. That's different. Like I don't know that I've seen a lot of that. It's a lot, but at least they got the reactionary part of it done this week.
Certainly something that surprised me. And again, we can talk about why this was the case, But if you're just looking at the box score to see the Chiefs have 5 sacks in this one, sans Chris Jones, don't know that I was necessarily expecting that. What told the story there to you? Was it how bad the offensive line played? Was it Russ holding on to the ball too long? Because we've talked about like the 2.5 second thing and how different his numbers look when he does hold on to the ball less than that or longer than that. What told the story and to why those numbers were what they were?
I think the Chiefs did a really good job of finding a way to take away his first option, like way at a way higher rate than they should have been. And he was just not finding the second guy. He was looking at the first guy, and then he was looking at the pass rush. And the pass protection was not good, but like he had more time than he used. He was like panicking in the pocket. I thought this was by far his worst game as a Steeler, and I didn't think it was great last week. It certainly didn't look pretty. I like the 5 sacks. Like, yeah, the offensive line wasn't very good, and that's a story of itself. But like at some point in a game, as you're a 13-year veteran quarterback, don't you realize that like, hey, my line's having a really bad day. Just get rid of the ball. Like,
yeah,
I mean, George Pickens going down the sideline made an unbelievable catch for about a 40-yard gain. Like he was that open on every he was, which is to say, not at all. But he was that open on every snap of the game. Like, if you don't have it, just check it to George and see what happens. Like that was there for them if they wanted it all day, and they went there once. I just, and that's not the coordinator. Like that's Russ has to be the one that's seeing what happens and makes those decisions, and that's what he's being paid to do. Like he doesn't have the world's best arm anymore. He's not mobile like he used to be. Like he's being paid to properly run the offense and distribute the football. And I think this is 2 weeks in a row that he did a pretty rough job of it.
In terms of like the pocket navigation too, I noticed a ton, like, there's guys on his left and right. He's got a ton of space to step up. And I was wondering if that would have been the case without Chris Jones. And I thought that we actually did see that come to fruition, but like for whatever reason, just didn't see it take place. Like he's either going to his left or his right and kind of forcing himself into some pressure at times as well.
Yeah. And the tackles are clearly the weakness of the line when it comes to pass protection. So outside is not where you should want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. But and to your point with like this being his worst game, didn't play well against Baltimore. I mentioned the defense trending in the wrong direction. I think the same could be said about what they're getting from their quarterback right now. Is there a level of concern there for you in the same way, or you kind of just look at that as well as, the level of competition that they're seeing and stuff like that? Like where are we at with Russell Wilson after the last couple of weeks?
I mean, I thought for the most part, Russ was a lot better than I expected him to be when he started playing. And so, like, having 2 games where he's worse doesn't really surprise me. It's really bad timing that it's coming at the same time as the defense taking a step back and playing the 3 most difficult games on their schedule. But, I don't feel any differently about Russ. He's a good player. He has been. I'm sure he will be again. It's a bad timing for 2 bad games, but I wouldn't really chalk it up to anything more than that.
I really think, again, and I said this even before this game, and then you see him throw an interception into the end zone. It's just like, obviously it's never a good time for turnovers. And this isn't really an offense that's built to make up for those, make up for turnovers, make up for, self-inflicted penalties, getting behind the sticks and stuff like that. But that, he throws another one in the end zone here. That really seems to be the thing, I think, is the timing of when these turnovers are taking place and just how costly they are. It's almost like a turnover and a half, the way that they're taking place.
Well, it's taking points off the board. I mean, that's had 2 turnovers in the red zone in the last 2 weeks that they would have at least gotten field goals out of. And both of those games turned out to be tied or 3-point games in the fourth quarter. They were 1-score games in the fourth quarter. So, like, yeah, I mean, the end result is ugly, but if Russ doesn't make those 2 turnovers and the Steelers get at least field goals on those possessions, both of these games end very differently than they did. And he's got to be better than that.
Which is why, like, and he had been at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So just from the turnover standpoint, because again, that is something that it seems like, I mean, it's a no can do for any no offense is going to say, hey, yeah, go turn it over. But you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I mean, if you have Jaden Daniels, you feel like you can break a few eggs to make an omelet. Like that's not going to happen here.
I love that analogy, by the way. But yeah, so like in this case, is there a level of concern just from what you're seeing from him that those will continue? Because I think that would really be the backbreaker for the offense more than anything else.
I don't see any reason to think they'll continue. I'm just going to chalk it up to 2 bad games, and I don't see anything to me that's like changed that's concerning. That probably facing some good opponents and was feeling the pressure to feel like he had to make a play. I feel like that has been a theme here and probably affecting offense and defense.
I want to get your perspective on one specific play, that interception, because even on the broadcast they were talking about it. I know a lot of wide receivers were calling George out specifically for that as well, just because felt like he didn't do his job in taking the safety away, making him come over there. Like Reed kind of had a layup of an interception. It looked like he's throwing into triple coverage because George isn't keeping him honest there. What was your perspective of that?
Well, I mean, George ran him out to the sideline. So, Russ said after the game he was expecting George to run something else. So, I don't know if George didn't get the play right or what. That happens from time to time. But look, I don't care if George ran directly backwards across the field, hopped the sideline railing, and climbed into section 126 and sat down next to you. Russ can't throw that ball. I don't care what George did. The responsibility is the 13-year veteran Pro Bowl, borderline Hall of Fame quarterback saying, gee, my wide receiver isn't where I expect him to be. And now there's 3 guys down there with Pat Freiermuth, and all 3 guys on the right side of the field are wide open. You can't make that throw. You just can't. I don't care what George did. It's just awful.
Yeah, a little check down there to Jalen Warren.
Was so covered that he didn't even really look for the ball because he knew it wasn't coming there, and then it still came there.
The ironic thing is that was a time where he was covered, and he's targeting him. But yeah, a check down there to Jalen Warren. I mean, that's
on second and 14. If Jalen runs for 5 yards, you get to 3rd and makeable. You live to fight another day. That's a perfectly acceptable play. And Van Jefferson is wide open in the end zone on the other side, too. Not that I'm saying that should be anybody's first or even second read, but, he was wide open.
I don't know that I saw him on that one, so I'd have to go back and look at where he was at. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I feel like it's kind of flying under the radar just because of the offensive and defensive struggles kind of taking place simultaneously. Not necessarily Chris Boswell, but I feel like the special teams units have taken a little bit of a step back. What's your take on that? Whether it's, Corliss Waitman, I feel like the punting game has taken a little bit of a step back, the coverage units as well. And maybe it's a product, obviously Ben Stronach this week, who's one of their best, but I feel like even it was happening the last couple of weeks. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah. A couple tough punts from Waitman. That didn't look great. They had to take a timeout in the first half, on a punt. So not as clean as they've been, but Mark Robinson forces a fumble. Man, if they could just get, I told Mark, he hit the guy too hard. You got to take it down a little bit so that the ball stays close enough to you that you can get it. When you hit him and it goes flying like the rings from Sonic the Hedgehog, it just goes anywhere, just turn it down a little bit. That was one of the loudest reactions of the entire season from the press box of guys who get paid to watch football generally are not reacting to the football. That was a loud, ooh, kind of hit there. And if they fall on that, totally different game. The fumble luck has not helped the Steelers at all the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And it's just, again, that's kind of something that was happening before that isn't now. Not only is the offense turning the football over, they're forcing turnovers that aren't happening, that they're creating them, but not taking advantage of them. They're not changing possession.
PQ drops the interception, can't get the fumble back.
Is there anything that can even be said about that though?
No, it's just luck.
Right. So I don't even know how to say anything else about it, right? It's something that was happening before that isn't going their way over the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
There's something I want to bring up to you, and I think mostly just to put it in people's heads, but I want your reaction to it too. If you had, let's say the Steelers beat the Bengals, finish 11-6. Okay. I think that's pretty likely right now. If you had been told before the season that the Steelers were going to lose to the Chiefs and Eagles, split with the Ravens, and win 10 of their 10 of the rest of their games.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have felt pretty good about that in June?
Yeah, absolutely. That's Alan. I literally had this conversation with an unnamed player on the team today. But literally about this, he asked me that same question, and I said yes. However, I think from a fan base perspective, that it has a different perspective on it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to tell anybody how to be a fan or anything like that. But I think when you go into a season, no matter what you think, once the games start playing out how they did, and this is what I was worried about with the way that the schedule was set up, they got to a point where people started overrating what this team was capable of because of what their record was. And it was only the way that it only looked that way. Their record only looked that way because of the way that the schedule was put together in the first half and the second half. And now we're kind of seeing it come to fruition where this is either going to be a 10-7 or 11-6 football team, which is on paper maybe even overachieving a little bit, and that's so frustrating to say because
not maybe
they're overachieving. And
they were 8.5 win Vegas team. That is clear overachieving.
They're overachieving from a roster perspective, which I think could be almost as frustrating that like the roster's still in this place. And I say that not being like me personally being impatient about it, but from a fan base perspective, realizing that we are on, Cam Hayward's, final few years, even though he's still playing at such a high level. Guys like TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick haven't won a playoff game. Obviously, we have no clue what Russell Wilson's future is. Like, the time is now for a lot of these guys, and it's so frustrating that we're still talking about, 10 wins, 11 wins, hopefully making the playoffs. Maybe they can win a playoff game, being overachieving, but that's the reality of where this roster is.
How much do you think the order of operations factors into the way people feel? If these 3 games had been in October and the Steelers just spent the last month beating the Jets and the Giants, would people
Raiders
feel better about the team right now than they do, even if the record is exactly the same?
Yes. Because I think recency bias is always going to come to the forefront. And it's also and this is like an opinion that I kind of hold true to because of what you're saying about how things could spiral. I'd rather have, some cupcakes before to give them a little bit of a tune up. I want them to have that level of competition. Obviously, I'm glad that they played these teams to kind of see where they stack up. Obviously wish that they would have gone a different way. But I'd also like them to be kind of riding a high going into the postseason. And maybe, beating a Cincinnati team, if that takes place, will be enough to do so. And if they don't get down in the dumps and they still stay collective in their efforts and don't let this 3-game losing streak get to them in a way that you brought up earlier like it could, then that could still take place. But that is the one concern with me with why I would have probably rather have had something like this take place earlier, is because you have more time to figure it out, as opposed to right now we got one more game before the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the good news there is that look at what they did last year. They lost 3 games to bad teams that they should not have lost to, which I really bothers me that people are comparing losing these 3 games that they absolutely should not have been competitive in compared to the 3 games that lost last year, which were all against non-playoff teams. 2 of them were 2-win teams at home. Like, those 3 losses are not like these 3 losses. Stop putting them together. You're adding unlike fractions. Like, just don't do it.
Well, even in the 2020 collapse, right? Like where they started out 11-0 and then
they were just not that good of a team. Like, this is very similar to 2020 in that, the true talent is being revealed here. It's not like they're playing that much worse. But I will say this, is that Tomlin has just very recently taken a team that was in a much worse stretch than these last 3 games from this year and turned it around to win its final 3 games and get into the playoffs in like crazy must-win scenario. So I think that should give them and us some confidence that they'll be able to do it again and get back to playing the way they were, which would probably result in a fairly easy win over the Bengals and a decent showing against the Texans in the postseason. I think that all is very much still on the table.
What's interesting to me about that last game against Cincinnati, so they play on Saturday against Denver. If they were to lose that game, that's it for them. I'm curious to see how they would come out in that final one if that takes place. They
without
also, like, in the back
Chase and T. Higgins, almost certainly. Maybe without Joe Burrow.
Well, and that's I guess kind of what I'm asking. Like, would they be playing those guys trying to play spoiler or no? Like I don't know because
I don't think Jamar Chase and T Higgins would even get on the plane. Burrow's a competitor, and I don't know. Maybe the team would say, "Hey Joe, this is a bad idea. You've been hurt a lot. Like, let's just take it easy." The guys that end up dressing will be trying their hardest.
Sure.
But I mean, I can certainly see the Bengals deciding that caution is more important than valor there, and decide to fold up shop.
I also kind of thought it was interesting. Like this ran through my mind was realistically Cincinnati probably rooting for Pittsburgh yesterday because now Kansas City clinching that 1 seed will have nothing to play for against Denver in that final week where they would have been rooting for Kansas City to knock off Denver so Cincinnati could sneak in as that 7 seed. So that's another part of it too. Like even if they were to beat up, like they're hoping for.
Well,
Kansas,
but if the Steelers had won, they could have had nothing to play for too. Right, because the Steelers could have won and locked themselves into the 3 seed if the Steelers won and the Bills won and the Texans lost.
Okay. Yeah.
So the Bengals needed it to go one way or the other, and they just couldn't split the 2 decisions. Right, they either needed Kansas City to have nothing to play for and go that way, or have Pittsburgh have nothing to play for, and that would be fine too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not looking good for them. And I'm just curious to see how they treat that last week of the season now. Does it change? Would it change you said about Chase in a triple crown right now? Do you think that they would let him play in that last game to kind of cement it?
Well, I don't think that he would want to, but maybe. If he wanted to, I think they would let him.
Okay. So it's more about, he's looking for that. He didn't get an extension this offseason. So, which now in hindsight, Cincinnati's probably like, yeah, can we get you for that number that you would have given us last year? Yeah.
I don't know that they could have afforded and done it. Their cap space is a mess, but yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, okay. Before we get out of here, Alan, tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the word so I can get paid. Subscribe to SN Plus. We've got the subscription part of the site back up so you can get rid of the ads and get all the best stuff from me, Derek Bell, Chris Ward, and Becker, the whole Steelers Now team. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so you keep getting episodes of Steelers Morning Rush, Steelers Afternoon Drive, sights and sounds from the locker room, post-game, Steelers Spotlight, all the best coming your way, and your notifications. So you just know when I'm live post-game, it's just right there. And let us know in the comments what you want us to talk about. We got a little break here, so we're probably going to be leaning on you guys a little more than usual to let us know what you want to hear so we can guide the conversation over these next, 10 more days now.
Yeah. They could be questions,
could
but
be
even
11,
if it's just like a specific topic.
Because they could play, well, I guess there's no Monday night. So it's either 10 or 9, depending on, I think they're going to play Sunday at 1 o'clock, but we'll see.
I do too. When did you say that'll be Sunday after the games?
I don't know when the last AFC game is Sunday, but it won't be until after the last AFC game at the earliest.
Gotcha. Okay. Also, leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You'll find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.